Hello and welcome back to another edition of Unicorn Dispatch Live. This is the first one after Hacker Summer Camp, which I know a number of you were at. So this is proof of life. I survived, you've survived. And I got a chance to see Heath at DEF CON, which was really cool. But even cooler is Heath wrote a book that we're going to talk about today. So Heath, who are you and what mistakes in life led you to this moment?
Well, the mistakes list is quite long. So started out my career in the trades after I got out of the military. Kind of taught myself IT, kind of worked my way into cybersecurity. And something I've learned over the years after spending 20 years in this field is cybersecurity is downstream of a lot of things. We're downstream of water, power, compute, the actual physical infrastructure of everything. But most of all, we're downstream of people. And the more I dug into the problems facing the way we build things in this country, the more I decided that I needed to actually write a book. And I ended up writing two books. The first is kind of the framework, which kind of led into the second book, because I realized fairly early on that there was going to be more information than could be included in just one book, because there were two very different subjects.
So let's talk about the books. When did you write it and why did you write them?
So I actually had been sitting last year watching several data center projects die. Some of them were good projects, some of them were bad projects, and I kind of took it upon myself to figure out, what does good really look like? Some of these projects were phenomenal, and they died anyway, and some of them deserve to die. So I kind of got thinking about it and decided, okay, let's put together a framework that anybody can understand, for whether it be a mayor, a citizen, they can sit down and understand what I'm talking about. A lot of the work in the book is actually based on stuff that Chris Crosby has actually talked about. He testified in front of Congress about it. Kirk Ophel as well from Overwatch Mission Critical. The framework is actually it's stupid simple. Don't be secretive. Put the numbers on the table so that the people can actually understand it and see it for themselves. Because the one big thing that I've learned over in the process of doing this is the one thing that kills projects: secrecy. End of story. Because it creates a vacuum, and that vacuum fills with paranoia and fear.
So I think this ties into a theme that I have brought throughout my career in cybersecurity, which is we have a challenge of storytelling. I mean, you talk about being transparent with the data. That's actually a fraction of the problem, right? Because it isn't just the data. We also have to let other people feel heard without condescending, which is a challenge when we are the technical masters of what we're doing and they don't even know how to turn on a computer. And so I'm going to start pulling some things from the book here. So first of all, to what you were just talking about with the data center, you're saying the public conversation is being drowned out by the loudest voices in the room.
Absolutely.
Right? That goes to business and that goes to money. Good projects are dying for bad reasons. Bad projects are getting built. The difference between the two has stopped being legible to most communities. And this is where we get into the storytelling. So the part I want to pull out here is you talked about data centers. And data centers, I think the average layperson today immediately starts thinking about water. So I'm going to read a little section of your book here. So the farmer and the server rack.
That's right.
One of the reasons this debate gets ugly is that data centers and agriculture often appear to be competing for the same future, right? When we have a zero-sum mentality, you getting something means I lose something. On one side, we have farms, wells, irrigation, land, food, and families who may have worked the same ground for generations. On the other side, you have a windowless building full of machines owned by a company that may not even be headquartered in the state. If you are a farmer, it is not hard to see why that feels insulting. You are using water to grow food. They are using water to cool computers. So how do we negotiate that? How do we tell a story? Because what is happening in this current time period, right, is the technological advancements require more compute. More compute requires more power, more water. And so we have a societal question that's coming into this, which is broader than just the, how do I vibe code, but realizing that we don't want to vibe code equals these societal discussions and debates, and there's a shift happening.
So I use the line in the book, water is trust. We human beings can live without a lot of things, but we cannot live without water. 3 days. That's all we get as human beings without water. And the water issue is, there's a lot of misinformation flying around about water usage. And I think you see this all the time. And I'm going to back up here just a little bit. You see people putting out, this water study from 2024 says that data centers are going to use this much water. Well, the technology has advanced so quickly, especially in water use. A study from 2024 might as well be a Dead Sea Scroll. The technology is advancing daily. It's pretty crazy. The trick here, I think, is these companies, the developers, need to be upfront with the communities about how much water they're going to use. And all water is not created equal. You have gray water, you have brown water, which everybody can figure out what brown water is. For instance, the Colossus 2 project in Memphis, they're using gray water from the city of Memphis that is being pushed through one of the largest ceramic clarifiers in the world. I know it's under construction. It cost them like $80 million to build this thing. And they're not using any water at all. And I'm dubious of the numbers, but the direction is pretty clear. They're going to save the area up to 5 billion gallons of water a year. I'm dubious of that number, but I'm not of the direction. So, like I said, you've got to weigh a lot of this stuff against each other. And like I said, the misinformation out there it's staggering. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, is to try to break some of these myths.
Okay. Any more we want to talk about with water and data centers?
I mean, it's your podcast.
You're the teacher. I'm just here to pull it out, man.
There is, like I said, if you look at all of these data center projects that have imploded recently, everyone's imploded over water. That is where these things get absolutely toxic. The book that I just finished and released right before DEF CON is called The Death of a Banana Republic, banana being build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And I used the data center fight in Festus, Missouri as the case study. It detonated over water. The rest of the deal on paper was beautiful. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. But the developer could not answer the simple question: how much is this thing going to drink? And it imploded. Every one of these that implodes tends to be over water.
So I'm going to shift that to another part of your book, right? So the title is "The Cloud Has Hit the Ground." And you anchor this in the chapter title, which is "The Cloud is Heavy Infrastructure." The greatest trick the technology industry ever pulled was convincing the world that the cloud was weightless. It was brilliant marketing.
Yeah.
And then later in the chapter, every cloud has a street address. And I like this for a couple of reasons, right? So first of all, we have security challenges as the cloud has become the de facto in the last 10 years of people thinking that because it's hosted by Amazon, it's hosted by Microsoft, it's hosted by Google, who are security heavyweights, I'm automatically getting the benefits of their security in what the cloud is offering me from them. And so there's an assumption from the business that I have transferred risk. And when we say risk transference, it isn't the roll your eyes, we've accepted the risk. It's they literally think that this has conferred a mitigation to what my potential risks might be. The second is that we get used to the fact that, I mean, the cloud and our whole infrastructure is built on the fact that all I need is low power consumption and bandwidth, and I pretty much can have unlimited compute and storage, which is what the cloud represents. I hope all of you can also see where I'm going to be going in the future of this episode, where we'll be talking about artificial intelligence. But for now, just talking about the cloud, right? Just compute and storage. And the fact is, whether that is your computer for compute and storage, or it is someone else's computer for compute and storage, you still are responsible for the risk. You still are responsible for the management of those assets. And it was a marketing move, much like creating demand for kale, go look it up, to convince folks of the economic utility of that. Because the cloud was just an easy way to get a part of something, a piece of something, and to scale with pieces, as opposed to wholesale having to buy a computer. So that ties back to this water situation, because that's part of where we're driving this, is that same idea was marketed as you can't see it, it's not physical, but it is. It's still there. It's just somewhere else and out of mind.
I think the word itself, and I actually say this in the book, I think the word itself does most of the heavy lifting. You know, it sounds clean and ethereal, and it's been, and you know this as well as I do, this has been an ongoing joke within the tech community for years. The cloud is just somebody else's damn computer. I see it a lot now because I primarily work in water and wastewater. We are starting to see even these places that should remain on-prem, in my opinion. We're even seeing them wanting to push into cloud infrastructure because there's real financial benefits to doing it. I think it's there. I think there's good times to use it and bad times to use it. And I think you would agree with me in the OT space, especially.
I can remember just a few years ago, the question being asked, would the cloud ever touch OT? And I remember at the time being like, and now almost every, I mean, who wouldn't be using it for some reason? I mean, we see data historians in the cloud, which there's numerous benefits, because as I have multiple sites, I can now collate and centralize my analysis, my maintenance, my understanding of what's happening. That also has security benefits as well. And a lot of folks are starting to stand up security operations capability, dealing with the IT OT convergence of cybersecurity coming into traditional industrial control system processes. And remote access management. Remote access management is another example of that. And those are things just a few years ago seemed distant and now are de facto.
And I think it's going to get, and I think over the next, especially with the advent of AI and how much we're seeing it come into the space, I think it's going to be one of those things where everything, especially even in the water space, where, like I said, I'm a big fan of water. I've been doing it for 20 years. We are looking at a true shift in how we manage the risk of some of these systems. And if you look at, especially with what we've seen lately with like the Minnesota breaches and what happened down in Texas, these small towns, one of the big things that I try to when I speak to industry groups is try to get across, you're not too small. They'll hit you. And I always use the mule shoe and Abernathy, Texas examples. You're not too small. They're going to come after you. These state
You're going to have to give some context. What is that? What is mule shoe, Abernathy?
Okay.
Not everybody's seen the documentary that just got released as well.
Well, it wasn't just that. I've been talking about these attacks for a while. So in, I think it was 2024, there were 4 or 5 small towns in Texas. I think the biggest one was like 5,000 residents that got attacked by Russian state actors. They managed to overflow some tanks, and I don't think they actually broke anything, but they were able to sow some pretty serious chaos. So, and yes, they did cover that in the movie that just came out, the documentary, which was phenomenal.
It's called Midnight in the War Room, for those of you wondering, and it had its world premiere at Black Hat just a couple of weeks ago in Vegas. And
I recommend every single American watch it, as I think Bryson probably would too.
I appreciated being a VIP for it, and I met with the producers, and I believe there's going to be additional series coming out, which I may or may not be in. So yeah, I do encourage folks to watch the just anchoring everybody. It was a 90-minute documentary looking at lots of different aspects of the impact we are seeing at the national security, nation state level. And one of the examples, they interviewed the city manager from this tiny town in Texas. And I posted the quick summary in the chat for everybody to see what we're talking about with the water attack, which, yeah, Semper Fi. You got a Marine shout out there. It was good. Yeah, from Cheddar. And it's a heartbreaking moment. And again, it gets back to this divide that we have. So imagine, I mean, this guy's a city manager for a town of like 2,000 people, right? And he's in his 70s. He's been doing this for a long time, and everything had been stable. Everything had been static. Who would attack the water of a small town like this in Texas? And there was a physical impact from it. And in the documentary, the producers brought him a picture because they did in fact indict a Russian citizen, a young kid.
Yeah, he was like 16 or 17 years old, right?
With the attack. And you see this old gentleman, he's just kind of looking at this kid and being like, this is the kid who has, disrupted decades of stability. This is the kid who has done this to us. And it's just it's mind boggling. And to what Heath's point is, nothing is too small anymore. Nothing that is connected to the internet is too small anymore. And I fear with the age of AI and the increasing democratization of capability and the ease of automation, including at levels that people don't have to know or understand, because there's no penalty really to getting caught unless you travel to a country after you've been indicted that you're not supposed to. I always love those stories. We're going to only see more. And so that's particularly poignant because while this story is from 2024, what's still happening today? Everybody is definitely aware of the news where we had the largest distributed attack on water systems in Minnesota just a few weeks ago. Those attacks appear to have metastasized, and 12 states are currently affected by attacks against their water systems. Just a month and a half ago, the California water system that serves 2 million people was attacked. Now, there was no impact to that, and that's one of the opening questions that we still have is, what are they trying to do or demonstrate? Because the access they had could have led to far dire consequences than what we did have. What's holding them back? That's today. That is a current to a story from 2 years ago that is still happening today.
Well, one of the things that get and I'm going to step back into I'm going to put my wastewater hat back on. One of the biggest problems that I see across the industry when it comes to water and wastewater is these smaller communities, such as, Muleshoe and Abernathy, and they don't have the funding to protect themselves. Raising water rates to pay for the cybersecurity is politically toxic, so they're kind of left in a bad way. So how do you even begin to address that issue? Which I have no answers on that one. And that's why if you got to the municipal covenant in the book, it's one of the reasons that I added the cybersecurity umbrella to the municipal covenant. Anytime a town brings a data center into its environment, it's putting a giant bullseye on that particular environment. They rely on the water and the wastewater systems. They rely on the electricity. Why shouldn't they bear some of the burden of ensuring that those systems are protected? In the grand scheme of things, for the developer, it's not a big ask, I don't think, but for the town, it would be absolutely immense.
Well, that's a large part of the work that my think tank has been doing in the space. So for those of you interested in more, check out Undisruptible 27 with Josh Corman. Undisruptible 27 is under the premise that we can't keep talking about this. We need to have deadlines to doing something. And so 2027 is kind of a mark for that. You could probably draw an inference that there is a general expert consensus that there will be in a Chinese attack against Taiwan in 2027, aligning to certain political timelines. And one of the ways that they would need to do that is to create havoc against the largest military ally of Taiwan, which is the United States.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Littleton, Massachusetts breach, they sat in that system for 300 days, just sitting in there doing nothing. And that should scare everybody more than any of these attacks, that they were just sitting there waiting. I think that Volt Typhoon is into many of our systems already, and we just don't know it because we don't have number one, we don't have the manpower, especially, and Bryson knows this as well as anybody that works in OT. We just don't have the manpower. We're short. I have no idea on numbers, but I know we could double our workforce and still fall short. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so pro data center, is because we are going to need the compute power as we move forward in protecting these things.
So let's pivot to compute, which is where we were before. Now we're back. Okay, so compute is the foundational quality to everything that we do by definition.
Yes.
That's part of why the cloud. That's part of why the data center push that we have going now, because we need to increase compute. And that's where we were talking about the challenges with the environmental impact and the not build my backyard and a lot of those things that's constraining that growth. And the largest driver of it is artificial intelligence. AI needs more compute. Part of the reason AI needs more compute is AI is not very efficient. But also, it is the first technology that I've seen since the birth of the internet that has actually captured the public mainstream's imagination and engagement. I have met many folks who are outside of our space who are interested in AI, because the very value of it is it makes things that were out of reach potentially accessible, right? I don't need to be a programmer to build something. Now, we can all have a long conversation about that doesn't mean I built something well or secure or that it works, and there aren't those things. Take that natural nerd response out of your head and just think about it, though, to the capturing the imagination. So much of this is marketing. So much of this is just the possibility. That possibility has landed in the mind of most of the mainstream folks. It's why you have CEOs saying, "Thou shalt AI in a company." Well, what does that mean? I don't know, but I know I want it because of the promise of that. And so there are real world practitioner challenges that we in security have with accommodating and securing that. So let's talk AI, Heath.
I am not anti-AI. I think it has its place in certain things. I've even put together a white paper called the Creative Architect's Blueprint, and it's basically this is how you use AI ethically in a writing process. You cannot black box things when it comes to being creative. You can't tell Claude, "Hey, write me a chapter about this." You have to write your. You can use AI, and AI is really good at doing very, very specific things. Research, for example, you need to double check it because, as I learned the hard way, it will hallucinate on you from time to time. But editing, I have no issue with using it as a line editor or a copy editor. I have no issue with people using AI to brainstorm. But when it comes to actually writing the prose, I think that AI doesn't belong there. I think that belongs to the author. Once the prose is written, editing, sure, fine. Because the thoughts are still the creative process still belongs to the author. When it comes to critical infrastructure, I think AI is going to come in and help us do very, very big things in efficiency. And I'm specifically talking about the water space. And this is what my presentation has been on all summer, is AI is going to do for the water space what SCADA did in the 90s. It's going to help do some of that math that's out there that humans don't have time to do. It's going to help us make our systems more efficient. It's going to spot patterns that a human being wouldn't necessarily spot. And I think it will eventually save money. However, when it comes to something as critical as water, AI cannot be the decision maker. There has to be a human being making final decisions. I don't think anyone out there would disagree with that. But at the same time, I see other industries that are benefiting it incredibly from what is happening, especially in the medical fields. I was just reading a story the other day about a guy's cancer was found because AI had spotted something in his lung that the doctor had missed. Pretty incredible stuff. I love the fact that we're using it for good. Yes, the funny cat videos are okay, but I love the fact that we're utilizing it in ways that we haven't even seen yet.
So the way I anchor that is the current revolution that artificial intelligence is driving today is one of knowledge management.
Mm-hmm.
I can take unstructured data, conduct analysis across that, limited analysis because it's still building out domain-specific things because it's generalized large language models. And I can have all of that contextualized for a particular user or role, asking it from a lens. That's what we see today. The promise of AI that Heath is talking about is where we go into the agentic AI, where AI starts to do things, where we start to approach super intelligence, which is where AI starts to become more equivalent of human reasoning. The human reasoning benchmarks of AI today are very low still, where it will actually do that. So I just want to anchor where we are today to that promise of where we'll be, which leads to, of course, the great question. Do you believe the AI bubble will burst anytime soon? And I think it's important to realize there's really two parts to this question. Because when we talk about bubble, that's actually finance. But the other part of this, I think, is where is in the Gartner hype cycle. Currently, we're kind of up on this part. And I think the other part of it is the technical question is when we're going to go into the trough of disillusionment of artificial intelligence.
And I would actually recommend that Jeffrey read the second to last chapter in The Death of a Banana Republic. It's called The Bubble Won't Save You. And there's actually a section in there called What the Fiber Knew. The dot-com bubble produced most of the fiber that we utilize today for the internet. And the people that own it today bought it for pennies on the dollar after the dot-com bubble burst. I think we could be looking at the same thing within AI. And like Bryson was saying, it's you have the finance side and, is the demand durable? And I absolutely think the demand is durable. But I did a lot of digging in this, but I think that there's a interesting dichotomy between the bubble and the demand and some of the circular funding that's happening. I'm not 100% sure if it really is a bubble, because it's hard to say. I'm not a finance guy. I'm a cyber nerd. I did what I did as much research into it as I can. If a bubble pops, somebody's going to own the infrastructure. That's all I'll say. Leave it at that.
So financially, as I think we've talked about on this show previously, there's going to be a market correction. There has been more money poured into the idea than, as Heath phrased it, then there will be the durable demand that matches that investment, right? The point of investment is I'm expecting a certain return. And so people are making bets. Some people are making smart bets. Some people are just making stupid bets, chasing, right? The FOMO of I want to be a part of the next big thing can drive irrational behavior. And there's always that feeling of being left out and of these ideas that drive investment at a level that there's no way a return could happen. So the reality is there will be a financial bubble burst of artificial intelligence. It's just the way it always goes. There was one with the web. There's been one with the cloud. There was one with cybersecurity. There's been one periodically, regionally and nationally in real estate. Bubbles form because of the way the capital markets come around these things. When is that going to burst? I'm going to guess 2028 is where we're going to see around the time period that there is going to be that level of market correction, because it takes time to see those things, see them fail, see what goes. There is a run space for individual investments and all of that. On the technical side, I think we're going to see the first retrenchment next year. And here's why I believe that. I meet with tons of executives all of the time. And those that have started to go in pulling in more development in-house because they believe they can do it with artificial intelligence being the delta. And what's particularly tricky about that is start to think about the things you've read about in the news, right? How often do we keep reading about the whole debate of safe AI? And how do we put guardrails around things from it doing bad things? And that's independent of the marketing of Anthropic with like, hey, look, I broke into something else. Like that's not a good thing. yeah, I'm glad we can see the capability, but I see so many failures in those statements and that have real concerns when there starts to be damage from those things. And so where I think there's going to be a retrenchment in 27 is the 6 to 18 months of internal piloting that a lot of these executives have poured into it, are going to realize the ROI in the enterprise wasn't there. I didn't actually save time or money for my SOC, my analysts, my threat researchers, my red team, all of these things, because the complexity of what looks simple at first, right? We didn't do it because it was easy. We did it because we thought it was easy. I think that's the retrenchment we're going to have. And in fact, I didn't even mean to do this, but I just wrote a paper, which I shortened into a blog, which I'm going to post here. I don't want to pull up my skills I'm editing.
And I kind of want to spin your thoughts outward just a little bit, Bryson.
Go for it.
One of the things when it comes to discussing whether the AI is a bubble or not a bubble, our main adversary in the AI build-out fight isn't affected at all by a bubble. China does not care that our finances have taken a crap. They're going to continue to build. They're going to continue to build at the same pace that they've always built. I'm not saying that China's AI build out is not been without issue, but their issues tend to be they have built too much, too fast, which is a very, very different problem than we are currently having.
And I think that matches what you said earlier, right? No one's concerned about a financial bubble for China. When I think that question's being brought up, we're talking about in our hemisphere in the West or in the United States. And to what you said earlier about AI is going to persist as a durable demand, that's because it's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to come entrenched. So to what I was saying there on the 2027 prediction, that's going to be the trial. That's why I was referencing the Gartner hype cycle, right? We're currently on the up cycle. Everything is possible. All things look good. All of these ideas, more ideas, AI for your AI for your AI, harness for your AI. I mean, it's just all of it, right? And we're going to hit a reality of the practitioner, which is, and this is part of why I wrote the blog actually, was AI just gets you there faster. Automation just gets you there faster. So if you're going to AI responsibly, and I'm not talking about development, right? I'm talking about structural process and policy. And so what I wrote this paper on was looking at and go, all right, you are going to bring AI into your security operations. It's going to happen. Here's how to do it smartly, and here are the gates to think through. And then the other thing, and I truncated it some because this would have been an entire book by itself, was giving AI use cases for particular parts of security operations, and more importantly, the metrics to measure them. And the reason that's important is this isn't the Bryson manager, you need metrics for metrics, or me trying to be like Deming, that metrics are what you manage. My point is, with metrics, it allows you to understand what the AI is doing, because I can look at outcome. At the end of the day, all of us here only care about outcome, right? When you are in the shit responding to an incident, you don't want to be fighting the systems that you're fighting. And AI being wrong, those hallucinations, any of that is creating friction and having you fight something at the moment when you don't need to fight it. Well, you know how you avoid that? It's the same principle, and that's what I was outlining here.
Well, one of the things, and like I said, I've been talking about automation and AI in the water space all summer, all these different speaking engagements. And one of the things that I've been stressing is that any of these vendors that are coming in promising the world with AI, make sure that you can see the decision path. How did AI reach a decision? You have to be able to see into that to audit what is actually happening, or you're going to end up with the black box that if you can't figure out how it came to a decision, how can you trust it?
which is why, to me, the metrics, the maturity around the outcome for what you care about is what's going to drive that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can look and be like, okay, this is what's working. This isn't what's working. It allows us to focus on that. And it also allows us to be purposeful about helping ourselves as opposed to just AIing ourselves. All right. So on AI, I'm going to quote from the book again. All right. The danger of overtrusting AI. Right. There's one more danger we need to face directly. Overtrusting AI may become as dangerous as ignoring it. A model can be wrong. A tool can miss context. An alert can be misleading. You briefly touched in earlier about how in critical infrastructure, blind trust is dangerous no matter who you are trusting. The correct posture is calibrated trust. Use the machine for speed, scale, and correlation and pattern recognition. Use humans for judgment, context, ethics, physical consequence, and final authority where safety matters. The future is not AI replacing people. The future is people who understand how to work with AI, outperforming people who refuse to learn.
100%.
Well, you wrote it, so I would hope you
Yeah.
100% agree with it. I think that's the greatest quote of all time.
I see this a lot. And I'm not pinpointing out in any single person in any single business or anything like that. But I have friends that refuse to bend and move with the future. They absolutely refuse to utilize anything because it has AI in it, and they're going to get just absolutely ran over. They're if they're not willing to continue learning, their careers are essentially going to be over fairly quickly. And I'm not saying you have to become an AI expert, but you have to learn how to utilize it within whatever industry that you work in. I could see great use cases, legal, accounting. There's even use cases, I think, within some of the different service industries. I have a barber that actually dictates all of his stuff while he's cutting hair to an AI, and it keeps records, and it's pretty neat stuff. I mean, he's embraced the future. So like I said, I think that we as a society, if you want to be part of the modern society, you have to embrace it or you're going to get run over.
So what else would you like to cover from your book?
The big thing that I want to get across is a data center isn't necessarily a binary choice. It's not a yes, we want data centers. No, we don't want data centers. There are areas of gray within it. And a lot of it's going to depend on the build. And this is why these developers need to be extremely transparent in how they approach communities. If the first time a community hears about a project is at a town hall meeting, it's too late. They're already behind the curveball. And that's one of the things that happened in Festus. Like I said, I used Festus as the case study for the second book. The developer was actually having conversations with the city officials as early as August of 2025, but they didn't hold a town hall until March. once all the decisions had been made and the pre-printed brochures, and essentially they brought the citizens in to applaud at the large tax number. And I highly encourage everybody to go get the free sample on Amazon and read the first chapter. It's completely free. As bad as you think it can get, it's worse. It's absolutely nuts. It's got it all. Secrecy, contempt, enough legal paperwork to wallpaper Buckingham Palace. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They literally were going to condemn 12 houses on Glen Key Court. Guess who they never talked to? The homeowners. Not once. How crazy is that?
Well, maybe they weren't married to those homes. I mean, who really wants to stay in their home? I mean,
but and that's the big thing that I tried to get across with the book was this isn't necessarily a binary choice. There are areas of gray. I also kind of tried to draw a line, and I do it a little more stark in the second book, between a NIMBY and a banana. And I even lay out what sets the two apart. And it's pretty simple, because a NIMBY can be satisfied. There is some particular piece of a project that a NIMBY doesn't like. It might be the water numbers. It might be the noise. It might be, a setback. Where a banana, their whole idea is kill the project, not improve it, kill it. It's a pathology. And the big difference is satisfiability. If a argument against a project can be satisfied, that's a NIMBY. If it's not satisfiable, that's a banana. And some of my favorite people were actually NIMBYs in Festus, because they eventually did make the data center a better project. And the thing is, we can't confuse what happened in Festus as the system working. It was an absolute failure on all fronts. It got reduced in size out of humiliation, not out of the system working. And if this does get built, and it's still very legally possible that all of this could end up canceled, because of how the developer met with 3 people at a time from the town council to get around open meetings requirements here in Missouri. A judge could actually throw out all of the zoning, and the project goes back to step 0.
Do you believe the pushback from affected communities will make a dent in the booming AI data centers being built in their backyards?
I think so. And here's why I say that. If you go to data center, I think it's datacenterwatch.org. I'm not sure if it's .org or .com. They keep an eye out on how many data centers are currently being contested, and the number grows every day. So I can't even begin to quote, because I haven't been on the site in like 2 weeks. It's nuts. The amount it's not millions of dollars, it's billions of dollars that are installed. And one of my biggest things that, and as I wrote the first book, and this is something that I started noticing patterns, and these patterns were, how do I want to put this? These patterns were, there's a bigger problem here. I started noticing bigger problems, and I started setting them off to the side, because, like I said, the first book was supposed to be the framework. But I actually was able to put together what has caused all of this. And I've kind of come to a conclusion that the current banana movement in the United States has a birthday. It's January 1st, 1970. And that happens to be the day that President Nixon signed NEPA. Because within 5 years of him signing the NEPA Act, and don't get me wrong, the law was a good law, and it was done for the right reasons. For God's sakes, the Cuyahoga River caught fire. We were treating the United States like an empty waste bin, and something needed to be done. And the law is absolutely simple. It's 6 pages, I believe, total. And it was written out of true moral urgency, and it was necessary. But within 5 years, the opponents to any project figured out that they didn't have to win a lawsuit. They just had to sue. And there's a case study in The Death of a Banana Republic where one of the biggest projects to get canceled was a wind project off of Nantucket. And it was 100% funded, or not 100%, but it was majoritarily funded by oil and gas money to cancel a wind project. So here you have oil and gas money canceling a wind project over a view. They literally made it too expensive by keeping them in court. And that's the banana movement in a nutshell. They use all these little tricks to make it too expensive to build. And we have moved into a point in our country, I think, where to actually build anything of consequence, it takes, I'm going to use the SunZia transmission lines. It takes electricity from New Mexico and moves it to Arizona and California. It's 500 and some miles of high voltage transmission lines. Took 20 years to put in 500 miles of high voltage transmission lines. 20 years. That's nuts. If that's the speed that we're going to build infrastructure in our country, we have a problem. I had the opportunity to talk a little bit with Dr. Emma Stewart at DEF CON for a few minutes, and we talked a little bit about some of the changes that FERC is making on large load interconnections. And she had some pretty interesting thoughts, and I go into this in the book as well and talk about how number one, I lay out exactly how the United States was electrified. Because to understand where our grid currently is, you have to understand how it was built. And I'll be honest, in some of the research that I did in writing this book, I learned a ton that I didn't even know. I had a pretty good idea on kind of how it happened, but I didn't understand some of the different nuances, especially with the TVA and some of the rural co-ops. So yeah, it was an interesting research project for the second book. Do I think we can get over it and actually build something in this country? I do, actually. And here's why. I'm going to hold something up to the camera here. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these or not, Bryson.
I don't know what that is.
So my grandma got this in World War II. My grandma built LSTs at the Seneca shipyard in Seneca, Illinois. This is a production award from the Army Navy. They built over 120 LSTs 700 miles from the ocean. And those LSTs put Marines on the islands of the Pacific and the Army on the beaches of Normandy. When the war came, farmers built ocean-going ships. During the Great Depression, we raised the Empire State Building a floor a day. building is what America does. It's what we do best. We've just kind of forgotten how. We need to remember. You know, the most American thing I think we do is argue about what to build, how to build it, but then we build the damn thing.
So I'm going to give two examples of that. The first is one where there is market constraint, there is innovation. And so we now see folks who are trying to localize artificial intelligence data centers at the residential level. The second is, of course, where you see, and there's a lot of complaints about this, where the rich can pull these kinds of things off as businesses, which is an example where a Musk facility between, I would say Tennessee and Mississippi, unless I got the two states wrong, it's in the article.
It's just across the state line in Mississippi.
Yeah, and essentially what they had is because of environmental challenges, they couldn't build the gas turbines they needed to create. So he did build his own electric in the state across. And you can see there's a wonderful picture because it's a whole giant plant, these two big buildings, and the state line goes right between the facility. And so like 1 foot here is the electric production, which was banned on this side, and the tax incentives for the compute and the investment was on this side. And so you got this with two states playing off of each other. And so one of the advantages in the federal system that we have in the United States is that you can play these states and the different challenges that you have at the community level against each other. So I want to ask one final question from the audience before we have to drop here in a minute. So you're gonna have to keep it tight. When will the USA start following Secure by Design for everybody at home? This was popularized when Jen Easterly was the director of CISA. Bob Lord and Lauren Zabirick are continuing that effort. Bob Lord was brought into CISA particularly to champion that under Jen. Now a 50-year-old strategy and principles when constructing new data centers, water, and power plants. That's a hard question to answer in a minute. See what you got.
Well, I know, and this is just my thoughts on that, because I do have my finger in the power and water side of it. It's something that I try to make sure that our engineers are designing around. You know, when it comes to some of the software, that's a challenge. Some of the SCADA software out there, as you well know, it's not exactly the most secure stuff in the world.
Final thoughts in like 10 seconds?
I have I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and Bryson for having me. This has been wonderful. Just so everybody knows, this is the second one. This is the follow-up to that one. So, which I owe you a copy of this because you're named in this one too.
Oh, thank you.
You might not get it till DEF CON next year, but you'll get it. And anybody that's really interested in how we have gotten to this point, The Death of a Banana Republic is probably some of the darkest stuff I've ever written, but it's also some of the most hopeful because we have some of the truly innovative things happening. We have a company that was audacious enough to build a nuclear reactor on a trailer. To me, that's just crazy. And it's a megawatt. It's nuts. That's American innovation at its best.
Thank you so much for joining us, Heath.
I've enjoyed it.
And everybody check out the book. These are the challenges that affect all of us. See you at the next Unicorn Dispatch Live.